How's this sound? Can y'all hear that well? Is it too much? Or just right? Okay.
On behalf of the Upson Historical Society, we want to welcome everybody to our Veterans Program for 2021. It's good to see all of you here. If you're not a member of the society, we extend an invitation to join in the society and participate in our activities. At this time, we'll have the presentation of the colors we'll get everybody to stand. And then we'll have the colors come up here. We'll say the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the
and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, now we have the Scout Pledge.
Mentally awake and morally straight.
All right, everybody can now be seated. And at this time, I'd like to turn the program over to Mr. Gary Gill.
Okay, good morning. Thank you for that presentation from our Cub Scouts. And I was just telling the mamas, you should have been here earlier to see the effectiveness, all these den mothers, I guess we used to call them, and how hard they work getting everything so orderly. And, it's like I told them, the world would be in bad shape without the mama. Anytime you need something done, whether it's church or any organization, you call the mamas, you call the women, because they get things done, don't they? We thank you again for the wonderful presentation. We want to say thank you to the Senior Center for allowing us to use the facilities, the Boy Scouts of America Troop 25, the John Houston chapter of the DAR, and don't forget we got refreshments afterward. Now, we'll go ahead and introduce our speaker, and I'm really glad he's here. This is a program I've had in mind for several years. I've just had it on the back burner ever since I worked with him. I saw bits and pieces of this program when he would do it at school, and I thought, one day that's going to be one of our veterans programs. So the time has come, and I'm going to introduce you to him now, Mr. Thomas Amy. How many know Mr. Amy? Okay. He is actually a former colleague of mine briefly in the local schools. But, he was born and raised in Texas. And by the way, I'm using technology here. That's amazing, isn't it? Instead of a piece of paper, I just pull it up on the Facebook site here. He was born and raised in Texas, moved to Thomaston in 1981. Worked in the U.S. Post Office for 31 years. He has a master's degree in history education from Columbus State University. He taught for 7 years in the local school system. Mr. Amy spent 5 years in the Marines, 2 years in the Navy Reserve, 12 years in the Army Reserve, 8 years in the Army National Guard, and he served in Afghanistan from 2003 to 2005. Tom had a broad range of services. I mean, this is perfect for Veterans Day, and he just about got them all but what, Coast Guard? And it's, I guess you can sign on with them later, Tom. The Coast Guard might could use you. You can have them all the bases touched. But I'm not going to waste any more time here because his program's going to be a good one. And it's entitled, I'm a Veteran Like My Father Before Me. And ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Thomas Amy.
Thank you, Gary. I'm not one for a microphone, and he told me I couldn't pass the speakers or I'd squeal at you. So I'm going to put this right here, and when I move, well, maybe I am. No, I'm not either. Okay, I'm going to carry this around with me. I asked Gary how long this show should be, and he told me about 20 minutes, 20, 30 minutes. And when I told my wife that, she asked me who was going to be there. I said, I'm not sure who it is. She said, do you think that you can keep it entertaining for 30 minutes? I said, I don't know, but as soon as everybody starts fidgeting, then I'll know it's time to cut it off, and I'm getting too long. Right now, first thing that's going to happen when you do something like this is something's not going to work. Right now, you're listening to the soundtrack to Braveheart. Sounds good, doesn't it? I'm sorry, the sound is not going to work on this, so I'm going to have to sing. No, I'm not going to sing. This is Chief Warrant Officer Robert Noel Amy. Robert Amy was in World War II. When he was 20 years old, he was called up from the New Mexico National Guard, sent to the Philippines, was captured on Bataan, went through the Bataan Death March, and spent 3.5 years as a Japanese prisoner of war. Bob Amy was released after the war, came home, got married, started raising a family, but he was still in the military, and when Korea came along, he was sent to Korea. He was a chief warrant officer, he was a soldier, and he was my dad. I didn't think it was going to be this emotional. I call this, I am a veteran like my father before me, because if it hadn't been for his service, I don't think I ever would have gone in that direction. But my training started very early, about the same time as these kids. Did you know that scouts was started to train soldiers? Oh, look at the surprise faces. This morning when they were practicing, they came up here and did the scout oath. I hadn't heard it in about 50 years, but I picked it up just like, I heard it one time, and after that, I said it with them every time. I still remember my training from back then. In high school, I was in ROTC, the 4 years that I was there, I went through the ranks, and my senior year, I was captain in our ROTC. This was in 1969. Anybody know what was going on in 1969? Vietnam. Soldiers were not appreciated back then like they are now. I was a pariah in my high school because I was proud to wear the uniform. I got made fun of. I didn't care. I was proud of that uniform, and I wore it. Well, right now you're listening to Bob Dylan's "Times Are Changing," because for me the times were changing. In 1971, I joined the Marine Corps, and right now you're listening to the Marine Corps hymn. My wife asked me if I was going to let it play all the way through. And I said, that depends on whether or not there's any Marines in the audience, because as soon as they hear that, they're going to stand up, stand at attention. And if somebody's standing, then I'm going to let it play all the way through. So right now I want to recognize anybody else that has been in the service. If you'll stand, please. Anybody else been in any of the services? Any of you Marines? Okay, nobody was listening, darling, so we can go right on ahead. 1973, does anybody remember A.M. and Irma Greathouse? Lived up on Jeff Davis Road? Nobody? Well, in 1973, I married their niece. We moved to Thomaston in 1981 and raised 2 kids here in Thomaston. And then, that entire time, I was in the reserves. I was in the Navy Reserves, I was in the Army Reserves, I was in the National Guard. In 1984, when I was in the Marine Corps, I was a ground support electrician with the 1st Harrier Squadron in the United States. Any of y'all know what a Harrier is? It's a jet airplane that goes straight up and then goes. They're a lot of fun to watch. They're a lot of fun to watch the colonels come in and land and forget to put down their landing gear, because they'll come in and stop and they'll turn this way, forget to put their landing gear down and come down. They get in big trouble, and all of us enlisted laughed a lot. Well, in 1996, I went to warrant officer school, and so now I couldn't laugh at officers anymore. But anyway, as of 1997, when I got my warrant from Congress, I became Chief Warrant Officer Amy, like my father before me. And then in 2001, everything changed again. This was 9/11. I know the older folks can remember exactly where you were. I had just gotten in bed, and my son called me and said, turn on the TV. I said, I just got home from work, I'm going to bed. He said, turn on the TV. He said it about 3 more times. I said, what channel? He said, all of them. Well, then I knew I had to turn on the TV. Something had happened. In 2002, late 2002, the United States invaded Afghanistan with their B-52 bombers. And then, shortly thereafter, the ground troops went in. But at the same time, the powers that be in Washington decided we needed to oust somebody in Iraq, too. So they split our forces and sent half to Iraq and half to Afghanistan. And I was with the half that went to Iraq. I got to Kuwait. These are names a lot of you won't know. Kuwait is right at the top of the Persian Gulf, right there. Forgot my laser pointer, but I'm using my finger. This is Kuwait City. I was sent to Kuwait, and my job was going to be to follow the 3rd Infantry Division into Kuwait and set up prisoner of war camps behind them, and my job was going to be interrogate the prisoners. If you remember in 1992, when we invaded Iraq, there were thousands and thousands of prisoners, because as soon as we marched in, they all threw up their hands and said, "I give up," and they didn't have enough room for all the prisoners. So when we went back in 2002, Saddam Hussein had learned his lesson, and he told the soldiers, if anybody gives up, if anybody surrenders, I'm going to take it out on your family. Wife and kids back home are going to be the ones that suffer, not you. So this time, when we came into Iraq, we went through Iraq in less than a month, and we had only a handful of prisoners and all these interrogators ready to go. The war was over so quickly that the powers that be looked around and said, "We got all these people in Kuwait City waiting to go somewhere. What are we going to do with them?" Well, I volunteered to go home, and they didn't like that idea. So they looked around and said, "Well, let's send half of them to Afghanistan and relieve the regular army that's there." Remember, we were National Guard. We'll relieve the regular army, let them come home for a year, and then they can come back in a year and relieve us. And that's what happened. When we were in Kuwait City, this is kind of what it looked like. The airport, lots of green grass, because they watered it. On the way to the city, you can see the oil fields were burning. When you got to the city, the roads were just like going through Atlanta. I mean, there were 3, 4, 5 lane interstates. Kuwait is one of the richest countries in the world. The Kuwait citizen does not work. The government pays them a check every month, and all of the workers are imported from Pakistan, India. They work for a year or two, and then they're sent back home. But this is what it looks like outside the city. Not a lot like Thomaston, Georgia, I'll tell you that. So we packed up our stuff in these big containers, and we went to Afghanistan. When we left Kuwait, it was 125 degrees on the tarmac. When we got off in Kabul, Bagram Air Force Base, it was 72 degrees. Man, I thought I died of heaven. It was nice. Bagram Air Force Base was just a big tent city. So we were all assigned a tent, and some of us made it feel a little more like home than others. This was Saturday morning, and he was out mowing his front lawn that he had planted when we got there with a pair of scissors. And then we started planning, what are we going to do here? And the planning went on and on and on for days. But in between time, we got to play a little bit. This was a party that we went to on Bagram. But as you can see, the soldiers were very diverse. We got male, we got female, we got black, we got white, we got sane, and we got crazy. I was assigned to the Low House in Kabul. The Low House was called the Low House because on our compound, it was the only one that was 1 story high. Everything else was 2 stories high. So I was assigned the Low House. I was the intelligence officer in charge of the Kabul sector of Afghanistan. My job was to find the bad guy, find anything that might hurt our soldiers and try to stop it. Over here in Fosley's Roadside Cafe, that's our back door. Fosley was one of my interpreters. He was from Virginia. In 1979, when the Russians invaded Afghanistan, he and his family left. Eventually, through a long chain of events, he ended up in Omaha, Nebraska. Right here is Farid, and although the two didn't know each other in Afghanistan, they followed the same chain of events and both ended up in Omaha. When we invaded Afghanistan, they both volunteered to come back to Afghanistan as interpreters with the Army. They both lived in Virginia at the time. This is my bedroom right here in the front of the low house. This right here was sandbags. And you can't see it very well, but through the window there, you'll see another set of sandbags that went around my bed. Why do you suppose I slept with sandbags? Nobody? Because we often got attacked by mortars or rockets. The bad guys would shoot rockets at us. They'd land in the compound. We wanted to make sure that none of that shrapnel hit us. There was a number of ethnic groups in Afghanistan. An ethnic group is a bunch of people who all speak the same language, who all look pretty much alike, who all have the same history. In Afghanistan, all of these people are different. And in the Afghan Constitution, it mentions 14 different ethnic groups. And the problem with that is, when the Russians pulled out in 1980, it left a power vacuum. And all of these different groups started fighting with each other. And so after the Russians had gone in there and bombed them, then they fought each other for 10 years. Then when that was over, the United States came in and just stirred the rubble with the B-52s. This is some of the city scenes that I got to see while I was there. Down here we have what is called jingle trucks. And I told the guys when I came home I was going to get my pickup truck and turn it into a jingle truck. They put wind chimes on the front bumper. And when they drive down the road, it jingles as it goes. These trucks are filled with stuff from Pakistan and India coming into Afghanistan because they don't produce hardly anything there. This is what's left of the presidential palace after the Civil War. The Russians tried to stay out of the city because they wanted the city's impact when they took over Afghanistan. But after they left and the Civil War started, those ethnic groups, they didn't care, and they wanted everything. So this is pretty much what the city looked like, the capital city of Afghanistan looked like when I got there. This is my favorite picture that I took while I was there. Somebody needed a cow moved. So he called a taxi cab. The taxi cab came, they took the back seat out, put it up on top of the taxi. They put the cow in the back seat and moved the cow to where it needed to go. I love it. To me, that's Afghanistan in one picture. In the United States, if you saw something like this, you would think you were in a tourist district where somebody wants to take you for a buggy ride, and you got to pay big bucks. Well, in Afghanistan, when you needed a taxi, you'd call somebody like this. He'd come pick you up. On the right, you're looking at a cemetery. They decorate the cemetery with ethnic flags. So when you're buried there, you get your flag put on top of your grave, and it'll stay there until it disintegrates. This one, I took this picture just because I couldn't believe it. This guy had his sheep on a leash and was walking down the major thoroughfare in Kabul, Afghanistan. Just taking his sheep for a walk. I wish I could have spoke their language. I really want to know what he was doing with that sheep. Dinner time has always been very important to me. When I got to Afghanistan, I found that it was important to them too. That's where they did all of their business. And they all wanted to do business with us. So they would invite us to lunch. But you didn't sit at a table like you do here in the United States. You sat on the floor on cushions. This particular fellow had invited us to lunch, and when we walked in, he looked at us. There was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There was 5 of us. We walked in. He took a look at us. He pointed at me and said, "I'll talk to you." Now, why would he want to talk to me? I looked like this. What is it about my appearance here that would make you think he'd want to talk to me? If you walked in, he'd want to talk to you. What about his beard? What about his beard makes it his? There you go. Who said it? The gray in his beard tells these folks that he's been around. He's got experience. He knows stuff. And he's an elder. When I walked in, they'd look at my beard and they'd say, "I'll talk to you." So I was very fortunate when I went over there. First of all, I was the ranking soldier, so I wanted to be the one talking to them. But because of the gray in my beard, they wanted to talk to me. So I would sit next to the person who's hosting the lunch. They put a big spread out here. Sometimes it was so big it looked like Thanksgiving. And then we'd all eat with our fingers. It was great. We'd all eat out of the same bowl. And I knew where these guys had gone to the bathroom that day. I knew where that food had come from. So when the host reached over and grabbed a handful of rice and squeezed it into a ball, and the oil was running down his arm like that, he'd pop it in his mouth. What did I do? I reached over and grabbed a handful of rice and squeezed it into a ball, popped it in my mouth. The oil was running down my arm, and then we talked. We talked for hours. Then I'd go home and take Pepto-Bismol. Oh, another thing I wanted to point out was the children. All of the children in here are either tiny, prepubescent girls or teenage boys, and they all have a job. If you are 3 years old with a sound mind, a sound body, you're going to work in Afghanistan. You're going to do something. Even if it's just sweeping the floors, you're going to be working. What's the teenage boy doing? He got a fan in his hand. Because there is no air conditioner. If you notice my shirt and this guy's shirt, we're soaked in sweat. It was hot in there. So the teenage boy come in there, and he just stood there, fanning, the whole time we were talking. But there were other dinners too. This is me in my office having lunch. This is me at Burger King having lunch. And this is some fine dining at the Continental Hotel where all of the reporters and foreigners went when they came to Afghanistan. Nobody said anything about Burger King. There was a lot of kebabs that I ate while I was there. This was my hail and farewell. That's when I got to go home. That was my final meal. That was my happy meal. The Canadians, I was at the Canadian compound, and they gave me a sandwich because it was lunchtime. And here I was on a stakeout, and no, I hadn't gained weight. I have a bulletproof vest on up underneath that sweatshirt. I was there for a little over a year. And for me, it was a year of change. This was the fellow that I relieved. I gave him his haircut on the day that he left. And on the right there is me. This one is me, not this one. I always like to put that picture up there at high school and have kids try to figure out which one's me. Favorite part while I was there were the children. The children were just like the ones that we raised here. They were happy. They were didn't know any better. They always had a smile, were always friendly, always wanted to talk to us. I put this picture in here because my sisters and my church and people back home said, what do you need? What do you want us to send you? Because everybody wanted to help. Well, I had a PX right next door to me. I didn't need food. I didn't need anything. But I wanted them to be able to help. So I said, send me toys, send me school supplies, send me soccer balls. So I had boxes stacked up in my bedroom, boxes and boxes of toys, and I would give them away every place I went. I felt like Santa Claus. It was great. But these kids had never seen a doll before. Because in 1979, when the Russians invaded, they used to take dolls and put explosives in them and set them out for people to find, for kids to find. They picked that doll up and it would explode. So an entire generation of Afghans grew up not knowing about dolls or toys, pretty much of any kind. They were warned against that kind of stuff. So this generation didn't even know how. I had to teach them how to blow bubbles. That's how. But I love the kids. Look at her face when she got a doll. Look at her face. My team and I had to go to an orphanage. These are orphan kids on the top. Those are the boys in white and the girls in their Afghan garb. They had to. My team and I had to go and provide security for the general's wife, who was going to come and give the orphanage a check. So we went, we did our security thing, and then we got to play with the kids. That was my favorite part of the whole thing. So that's what I'm going to do right now. Play with some kids. I think I can talk loud enough for everybody to hear. What do you think? Y'all good back there? All right. Kaylee, where's Kaylee? Come on up, Doctor. This is Kaylee. I'll get that. Come on up here and show yourself. This is Kaylee. If you notice what she's got in her hair, I had her braid these into her hair this morning. They have a lot of textiles. And textiles is pretty much all they produce there. And so, since they don't have, they can't go down to the corner store and buy doodads for their hair. They would make doodads for their hair, and then they'd braid them into their hair, and these would frame their face because they put them in the front to frame their face, because once they got their clothes on, everything would be covered except for the face. Where's Katana? Come on up, darling. Come on. Katana is the younger prepubescent girl, Afghan girl. She would wear something like this. You can see in the photo, they have long dresses on. I didn't bring any of these home. Didn't think about it. But I brought a lot of these scarves. And they would just place the scarf on their head, And then they would take this, wrap it around their shoulder, and step out here and give us a little turn. You notice everything is covered. Well, you can't really see her, well, it'll be on her, never mind. But she would have these in her hair, and it would be coming right down the side of her face here, so that you'd be able to see it, and everything else would be covered. Thank you, Darn. Now, once the girls got on up in age a little bit, once they go through puberty, then they are locked away. And if for some reason they have to go out into public, they can't be seen by other men, so they would wear something called a burqa. This is a burqa. It's cut short in the front so that she can actually do something with her hands. Where's your hands at? She could actually do something in front of her with her hands, but when she's not doing something, it's long enough to cover the hands. In the back, it will go all the way to the ground. In her case, she's so short that it would drag on the ground. But the reason that I used her for this demonstration is this is a burqa for a full-grown Afghan woman. And I asked her how it fit on her head. She said, it's fine. And I pointed at some of the women in here. I said, now look at their heads. Will it fit any of them? And she looked around and said, no. Because the Afghans are underfed, and so they don't fully develop even in maturity. And their heads, for some reason, are not very big. Can you walk in that? As long as you don't have to go up and down steps. Okay. Thank you, Shirley. So the burqa was very important over there because we had to look for other things. When I look around here, I can pretty much tell who's male and who's female. When you look at this burqa, you can't tell if they're male or female, so you're looking for clues around the feet. They wore different kinds of shoes, but many a time, males tried to escape an area wearing a burqa. And there was several knife attacks by males wearing the burqa who were hiding a knife under. This is Monica, Maria, and Free, but these three right here. I told you that if you're old enough, you're working. These three went to school in the morning. Then they went to Chicken Street, which was the big shopping area in Afghanistan. And they sold magazines. They loved to see the Americans coming because they knew that the Americans were going to buy a magazine. And so they knew our vehicles. When we drove up, they'd come running, these three in particular. And we got to be real friendly with them. We'd buy their magazines. And they would tell us if there's anything different. Hey, you need to talk to this guy down here. Hey, you need to watch out for this down here. So these three right here were very important to us. Chicken Street was called Chicken Street because there was a Kentucky Fried Chicken sign up on the street. There was no Kentucky Fried Chicken, but there was a sign.
Could you pick your mic back up, please?
Oh, I'm sorry. My apologies. So what was my job when I was over there? I had a team of intelligence officers. This was my team right here. There was two policemen. There was one IBM executive, one postman, one detective, and one teddy bear salesman. Anybody pick out the teddy bear salesman? Most of you pick out the postman number, right? Freed and Fuzzley, I introduced you to already. They are our interpreters. My job was to visit schools. We went to schools in the area. We took those things that people had sent to me. We gave them soccer balls and we gave them school supplies. This school, I called the headmistress and said, I've got 50 bags of stuff to give to people, give to kids. And she said, well, I'll pick out the 50 poorest kids and put them in one room and you give them out. It's important for me to put them into the kids' hands because if I gave it to the principal, the kids would never get it. It'd go on the black market, they'd sell it, and kids would never see it. So I went there, and when I went there, I looked around, and it was huge. The place was huge. We went to the room, and I gave out the 50 bags, and I asked the lady, how many kids do you have? She said, there's 7,000. We have 3,000 in the morning who go to school from 8 to 12. And then there's 4,000 in the afternoon that come from 1 to 5. So they didn't serve them lunch. There was no PE. There was no music. It was just math, science, language, and English. They go to those 4 subjects for an hour each, and then they go home. Or they go to Chain Street and sell magazines, whichever. The other one, this school, all of those little dots are bullet holes. At some point in time, this building was under attack by somebody from somewhere. But I put this one on here because this schoolroom had 4 classes. There's one right here, there's one right there, there's one on the other side of this sheet, and there's one in this corner. There's 4 classes going on simultaneously. They were all wrapped up in coats and blankets, and it was the middle of winter. And there's no glass in the window panes, all been shot out. So I always told my high school kids, you think you got it bad. You got to sit through an Afghan winter on the floor in the school. But they were adamant that they were going to get their education. My job was to visit towns. The towns all pretty much looked like this. There were no trees in Afghanistan. They all been cut down and used for firewood. So everything was made out of mud, which made it very easy when the Civil War was going on. It was very easy to destroy everything. And that's pretty much what they did. My job was to go into those towns and find the elders, talk to the elders. We would drive in dressed pretty much like this, and there was no way that they'd know who we were, where we were, what we were coming for. And we'd go in and say, what do you need? Do you need a school? Do you need a clinic? Do you need a well? Well, when they found out that we were there asking these kind of questions, I'm sorry, I'm trying to get it out of everybody. I just realized it was in her way. Then they were very anxious to talk to us because they want. Everybody wants, right? So we'd sit down and we would talk, usually over a meal, and we talked for hours about what was going on in the area, what kind of problems they're having with the Taliban, what kind of, if I send somebody out here to dig a well, are they going to be safe? That kind of stuff. So I'd talk to the elders. I'd visit bazaars and talk to the owners. This fellow owned a cobbling shop. He fixed shoes. That's a shop right here that's sitting in. I talked to the butcher and the pelt maker, the chicken salesman. I talked to everybody. Then I visit the ANF, which is the Afghan National Forces. I visit the government officials. This is Hamid Karzai's palace right down here. That's the only picture I could get because once I got inside, they wouldn't let me take any more pictures. And I'd try to stop the bad guy. When I'm talking to all these people, what I'm looking for is information. Where's the bad guy? And how can I stop him? And this is two of them that I was able to put in Guantanamo. Intelligence officers over there felt like that they had really achieved something. Not if they had arrested a bad guy, but if that bad guy was bad enough to go to Guantanamo. I was able to get two there, and I was so proud. I don't know if they're still there or not. But one of them had this pin on him, and that pin is a .22 pistol. A .22 round would fit into that pin. They close it up. You pull back on this little thing right here and let it go, and it'll shoot a .22 round. This was a cache that we found of rockets and all kinds of ammunition, all kinds of stuff that the Russians had left behind. And those caches were all over the country. We'd find them and we'd blow them up. This is a roadside bomb, an IED. I'm sure you've heard of an IED before. It's an improvised explosive device. Improvised means they made it up. And explosive is pretty self-explanatory. That's one of our Humvees that didn't make it to where they were going. Another thing they liked to do was when we'd get out of our car, say on Chicken Street, we'd walk away to talk to these people. They like to put bombs in the car, usually under the hood, so that when you started it up, it blow up. So we always left somebody on guard at the car, or we searched the car when we got back, one or the other. This fellow didn't search his car very well. The worst part for me was the fact that the kids were getting in the way of all of this stuff. These two were at the hospital one day when I was delivering toys. And this little fellow, I gave him a chicken and a ball. And then I was asking him if he wanted a teddy bear. He thought that I was trying to take the chicken away from him. So he decided that if I went to sleep, this guy would go away. So he just closed his eyes and rolled over, and I went away. And this is Freba. I introduced her to you earlier. In 2004, Freba was killed by an IED. And our troops didn't get away completely scot-free. This was the ISAF compound in front of the commander's tent. These are all of the flags of the International Security Force Afghanistan, all of the different countries that were there. And each day, the flags were taken to full staff, and then if anybody had lost a soldier the day before, it was taken back to half staff. On this particular day, the American flag, the British flag, and the Canadian flag were all at half staff. I was assigned to the 10th Mountain Division when I was over there, and on our worst day, we lost 8. And so I always try to remember those 8 whenever I'm doing something like this. But thanks to God, I was able to make it home, and everyone from the 221st Military Intelligence Battalion that I went with came back home. And this time, folks were glad to see me. Way different from 1969. Does anyone have any questions about anything? Yes, sir.
You talked about, you went out and talked to all these people.
Right.
Do you speak that language?
No, that's why I had the two interpreters, Bosley and Farid. They went with me everywhere.
You didn't have any idea then what they were saying to the Afghanistani people, is that correct?
That's correct, but they were American citizens. I want you to understand, we weren't using Afghans to translate for us. They were American citizens who were translating for us. Yes, sir.
At first, you showed all those different sects that are in Afghanistan, Pashtun and all that.
Mhm.
Is there any hope that will they always pretty much seem to fight each other?
Always.
So
They hate each other.
Is it any, so there's no way to really have a central government?
They don't consider themselves Afghans, not the way you consider yourself an American. If you ask them, what are you, they would say, I'm Pashtun, I am Hazara, I am something. But Afghan will never enter the conversation. They don't consider themselves. When the British occupied that area, they went in and said, all right, we need different governments, so we're going to draw a line right through here. And when they did, they said, this is Afghanistan, this is Pakistan. But when they drew that line, it was right through the middle of the Pashtun nation. And the people there will tell you, this is not Afghanistan, this part down here in the south is not Afghanistan, it's Pashtunistan. And that's how they think. And the people right on the other side of the border in Pakistan, which is where we found Osama bin Laden, remember that? He was in Pakistan. He was in Pashtunistan. The Pashtuns took care of him, took him across the border into Pakistan, and the Pashtuns were the ones who were hiding him.
Well, what was your most intense moment?
My most intense moment, I was at the Battle of the Boneyard, is what the media back home called it. We were driving through what was called the Boneyard because it was a bunch of Russian tanks and leftover equipment that the Russians had left and was rusting in what they called the Boneyard. We were driving past when we were attacked, from within the Boneyard. And we were under suppressive fire for who knows how long. Well, way too long for me. And until we were able to call in reinforcements. But the funniest, that was most intense for me. But I had been there for some time by that time. You may not think that this is an intense moment, but when I first got there, my very first assignment, go to this guy's house and have lunch. So we drove up to this guy's house to have lunch. We all got out. I'm scared to death. This is my very first assignment in country. Afghanistan has the largest number of landmines of any country in the world because the Russians just dropped them out of, like they're everywhere. So I got out and I'm looking around. I'm nervous as a cat. And a boy about 12, 15 years old came around the corner of the house with a gun in his hand. And we went spastic. Everybody's jumping for cover. Come to find out, the boy was playing with a plastic gun. That might sound funny to you, but we almost killed that little 12-year-old boy. And from that point on, we preached the whole time we were there to every adult that we took away many of those guns from kids that we saw playing in the streets. We didn't ask them if we could have them. We took their guns, but we usually gave them a toy or soccer ball or something in exchange. But we took up as many of those guns as we could because we knew somebody was going to get killed just playing soldier, playing army, playing Taliban. I don't know what they were playing. But so that was intense.
But back to the other one, Battle of the Boneyard. That was intense for a number of minutes. But what was funny about it was after it was all over, we captured several of them. We did an interrogation. We turned them over to the MPs, sent them home. What was funny about it was that by the time we got back to the compound, Carl Welch was my NCOIC. His wife was already trying to call him, find out if he was okay. That's how fast word got back here. She already knew that the battle had taken place and that we had been in it. It was amazing to me to stand out in the middle of an open field. You could see every star in the sky because it was so dark there. There was no electricity, no lights. I'd stand out in the middle of an open field talking on a satellite phone to my wife back in Thomaston, Georgia, and just carrying on a normal conversation. That was amazing to me, that the information could, I mean, it shouldn't be, because I sat, watched Walter Cronkite every night when I was a kid, talking and showing me pictures from Vietnam. So it shouldn't have been all that amazing, but still it was. Did I answer your question? Yes. Anybody else? This may be your only chance ever to talk to somebody who was there. Nothing? Well, I appreciate your time, and thank you, boys, for your attention. I appreciate it.
And thank you, Mr. Thomas Amy, and thank you for your service, and for all of you other veterans, we thank you for your service as well. Our Cub Scouts, our DAR ladies, thank you. It's been a very good program. And we want to invite everyone to stay. The DAR ladies have refreshments back there, and you can hang around, talk. You can talk to Mr. Amy some more. He has some stuff on the table laid out here that you can look at. And if you're that interested in the ball games, you can just, turn on your phone.